The morning sun barely touched the stone walls of Windsor Castle when Princess Charlotte stopped walking. Her polished shoes froze mid-step on the ancient corridor. Behind her, 2 royal guards stood at attention, their faces carved from stone. Beside her, Kate Middleton felt her breath catch. Something was wrong. Charlotte was only 9 years old, but her eyes held something different that morning. Something defiant. The kind of look that makes adults nervous. She stood perfectly still in her navy dress, the one chosen carefully for the state ceremony just hours away. Her small hands were clenched at her sides. "Charlotte," Kate said softly, bending down slightly. "Sweetheart, we need to keep moving." The princess didn't move. Didn't even blink. The guards exchanged a glance. In 20 years of service, they'd never seen this. Royal children didn't stop. Royal children didn't refuse. They followed protocol. Always. The ceremony was scheduled to begin at 10 o'clock sharp. Dignitaries from 12 countries waited in the throne room. Cameras were positioned. The world was watching. But Charlotte wasn't moving. Kate's heart began to race. She knew that look. It was the same expression Charlotte wore when she was 3 years old and refused to leave a crying child alone in a hospital they'd visited. The same stubbornness when she insisted on sharing her birthday presents with children who had none. This wasn't a tantrum. This was something else. "What's wrong?" Kate whispered, her voice steady, but her mind spinning. The protocol officer would arrive any second. The family was expected to process through the East Gallery in exactly 4 minutes. The timeline was precise, rehearsed. Unbreakable, Charlotte looked up at her mother. Her blue eyes were wet, but no tears fell. "I can't do it, Mummy." The words hung in the air like smoke. Kate felt the weight of them. Behind them, she heard the faint click of approaching footsteps. More staff. More pressure. More eyes. "Can't do what, darling?" Charlotte's voice was small, but clear. "I can't go out there and pretend." Kate's mind raced. Pretend what? The ceremony was simple. Walk, smile, wave, sit. The same routine Charlotte had done dozens of times. But something in her daughter's voice made Kate pause. Made her really listen? One of the guards shifted slightly. A tiny movement, but in the rigid world of royal protocol, it screamed discomfort. The ceremony couldn't wait. The schedule couldn't bend. But here stood a 9-year-old girl, planted like an oak tree, refusing to move. If you want to see how this unfolds, make sure you're subscribed. This story goes places you won't expect. Kate glanced at the guards, then back at Charlotte. The corridor felt smaller suddenly, tighter. The morning lights streaming through the tall windows seemed too bright. Every sound was too loud. The distant murmur of gathering crowds outside. The rustle of fabric. The tick of an unseen clock. "Charlotte, I need you to tell me what's happening." Kate's voice was firmer now, but gentle. She touched her daughter's shoulder. The princess looked down at the floor. Her jaw tightened. When she spoke, her words were barely a whisper, but they hit like thunder. "Grandmother told me I have to smile today, no matter what. Even if I'm sad. Even if it's wrong. She said that's what princesses do." Charlotte's voice cracked. "But I saw what happened yesterday, Mummy. I saw it." Kate's blood turned cold. She knew instantly what Charlotte meant. Yesterday, during the final rehearsal, something had happened in the kitchen quarters. Something the family had been told to ignore. A staff member had been dismissed publicly, harshly, and Charlotte had witnessed it. The girl wasn't refusing to attend a ceremony. She was refusing to pretend nothing was wrong. Refusing to smile through injustice. Refusing to follow a rule that asked her to abandon her conscience. The footsteps in the corridor grew louder, closer. Time was running out. Kate looked into her daughter's eyes and saw something that terrified and amazed her. She saw herself at that age. She saw every moment she'd had to choose between what was expected and what was right. And she saw her daughter standing at that exact crossroads right now. The guards remained silent, but their presence felt heavier. They represented everything Charlotte was supposed to obey. Every rule. Every tradition. every expectation that had governed this family for 1,000 years, but Charlotte wasn't moving. And somehow, Kate knew the next 60 seconds would change everything. Asterisk, the protocol officer rounded the corner, his face already tight with stress. He carried a clipboard, wore a perfectly pressed suit, and had the look of a man who'd never missed a deadline. When he saw Charlotte standing motionless in the corridor, his expression flickered. Just for a second. Then the professional mask returned. "Your Royal Highness," he said, addressing Kate with a slight bow. His voice was calm but urgent. "We're approaching the scheduled time. The family must take their positions." Kate didn't respond immediately. She was still looking at Charlotte, reading her daughter's face like a map. The princess's chin trembled slightly, but her feet remained planted. "Mr. Harrison," Kate said slowly, not breaking eye contact with Charlotte, "we need a moment." The protocol officer's eyebrow twitched. Just barely. "Ma'am, the dignitaries are seated. The Prince of Wales is already in position." "The ceremony needs a moment," Kate repeated, her tone sharper now. Silence crashed down like a wave. The guards stiffened. Mr. Harrison's knuckles whitened around his clipboard. In the distance, a clock chimed. 9:53. 7 minutes until the procession was scheduled to begin. Charlotte looked up at her mother, surprise flickering across her face. She'd expected to be overruled, expected to be scolded, expected to be told that princesses don't make scenes. But Kate's expression was different, focused, almost fierce. "Charlotte," Kate said quietly, kneeling down so they were eye to eye. "Tell me exactly what you saw yesterday." The protocol officer made a small sound of protest. This wasn't the time. This wasn't the place. But Kate held up one finger without looking at him. "Wait." Charlotte's voice shook as she spoke. "Mrs. Patterson. The lady who brings me biscuits sometimes. The one with the kind smile." She paused, swallowing hard. She broke a teacup. "Just one. It was an accident. But the head steward yelled at her in front of everyone. Called her careless. Told her she was being let go immediately. She started crying, 'Mummy.' She apologized over and over. But he wouldn't listen." Kate's jaw tightened. She'd heard rumors of this. Whispers among staff. The new head steward ran things with an iron fist. Old-fashioned, harsh, efficient, yes, but cruel. She'd meant to address it. But with the state ceremony preparations, with 100 other demands, she'd let it slide. Put it off. And Charlotte had seen it. Absorbed it. Carried it. Today, Charlotte continued. "Grandmother said, I have to go out there and show everyone how perfect we are. How happy. How proper." She looked directly at Kate. "But we're not perfect, are we? We just pretend." The words hung in the air, raw, honest, devastating. Mr. Harrison cleared his throat. "Your Royal Highness, I truly must insist. Did you know about Mrs. Patterson?" Kate asked him, her eyes still on Charlotte. The protocol officer hesitated. Yes, ma'am." The head steward felt immediate action was necessary to maintain standards. "Standards," Kate repeated softly. She stood up, her full height suddenly seeming taller. And was Mrs. Patterson given a chance to explain? To apologize properly? To keep her position? "The head steward has full authority over. That's not what I asked." Another beat of silence. Mr. Harrison's face flushed slightly. "No, ma'am." She was not. Kate turned to look at the guards. They remained expressionless, but she could see the tension in their shoulders. They'd witnessed the incident too. Everyone had, and everyone had stayed silent. Because that's what you did? You followed orders? Kept your head down. Maintained the system. Charlotte watched her mother, barely breathing. Waiting, Kate took a deep breath. The ceremony clock was ticking. The world was waiting. Protocol demanded compliance. Tradition demanded obedience. Her role, her duty. Everything she'd been trained for since marrying into this family screamed at her to take Charlotte's hand. Smooth this over and walk forward. But something deeper screamed louder. "Charlotte is right," Kate said, her voice clear and steady. "We can't go out there and pretend everything is fine when it's not." Mr. Harrison's face went pale. "Ma'am, the ceremony will start when we're ready." Kate looked at him directly. "Find Mrs. Patterson. Bring her here now, Your Royal Highness." "That's highly irregular. The ceremony can wait 10 minutes while we fix something that should have been fixed yesterday." Kate's voice didn't rise, but it carried absolute authority. "And someone needs to inform the head steward that his decision is being reviewed. By me personally." The protocol officer opened his mouth, closed it, looked at the guards as if they might intervene. They remained statues, professional, silent. But if you looked carefully, very carefully, there was the slightest hint of approval in their eyes. Charlotte's expression transformed. The fear melted away, replaced by something close to wonder. "Move, please, Mr. Harrison," Kate said firmly. He did, almost stumbling in his haste to pull out his phone and make calls. His voice was tight as he spoke in rapid, clipped tones to staff members. Rearranging pieces of an enormous machine that wasn't supposed to bend, Kate knelt back down to Charlotte. "You were right to stop. You were right to speak up. Being a princess doesn't mean pretending. It means standing up for what's right, even when it's uncomfortable." Charlotte's eyes filled with tears, but this time they were different. Relief, gratitude, pride. "Are you going to be in trouble?" she whispered. Kate smiled, a real smile, the kind that reached her eyes. "Probably, but some things are worth trouble." Footsteps echoed down the corridor again. Faster this time, more urgent. Within moments, a small woman in a staff uniform appeared, escorted by an aide. She had gray hair, nervous hands, and eyes red from crying. "Mrs. Patterson." When she saw Princess Kate and Charlotte, she immediately started to curtsy, confusion written all over her face. "Mrs. Patterson," Kate said warmly, gently stopping the older woman from bowing. "I understand there was an incident yesterday. I want you to know that your dismissal is being overturned. You'll be reinstated immediately." With a formal apology, Mrs. Patterson's hands flew to her mouth. "Your Royal Highness, I don't." "You've served this household faithfully for 12 years, Kate continued. "One accident doesn't erase that, and no one should be treated the way you were treated." The woman's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you so much." Charlotte stepped forward suddenly. She reached out and took Mrs. Patterson's hand. "I'm sorry that happened to you," she said simply. And that's when something extraordinary happened. Mrs. Patterson, this woman who'd spent years in service, who'd been trained in royal protocol, who knew every rule about boundaries and propriety, bent down and hugged the princess. Just for a second. Just a quick, gentle embrace. The guards didn't move. Mr. Harrison looked like he might faint, but Kate smiled. When they separated, Mrs. Patterson was crying openly now. Happy tears. Grateful tears. She curtsied properly, thanked them both again, and was led away by the aide, who kept whispering reassurances. Charlotte turned to her mother. "Can we go now?" Kate nodded. "We can go now." They began walking, slowly at first. Then, with growing confidence, the guards fell into step behind them, their boots clicking against the stone floor in perfect rhythm. Mr. Harrison trailed behind, frantically updating his clipboard, rearranging schedules in real dash time. As they approached the East Gallery entrance, Kate could hear the murmur of the crowd. The ceremony would start late. 12 minutes late. An eternity in royal timing. There would be questions, criticism, possibly consequences. But when Kate looked down at Charlotte, she saw her daughter walking with her head high. Not with arrogance, but with quiet dignity. The kind that comes from knowing you did the right thing. They reached the entrance. Beyond the doors, the throne room waited. Hundreds of people, cameras, expectations. Kate took a breath, squeezed Charlotte's hand once, and nodded to the door attendant. The doors opened. The throne room was magnificent. Gold leaf covered the high ceiling in intricate patterns that seemed to dance in the light from 3 massive chandeliers. Red velvet lined the walls. Dignitaries sat in precise rows, their faces carefully neutral. At the far end, on the raised platform, King Charles stood in his ceremonial robes. Beside him, Prince William waited, his expression unreadable. Every head turned as Kate and Charlotte entered. The delay hadn't gone unnoticed. Whispers rippled through the crowd like wind through wheat. Camera shutters clicked in rapid succession. This would be analyzed later, dissected, questioned. Charlotte's hand tightened around her mother's.
Act!
But she didn't falter. Didn't look down. She walked forward with the poise she'd been taught since birth, but underneath it was something new, something stronger. They took their positions beside William. He leaned slightly toward Kate, his voice barely audible. "Everything all right?" "Yes," Kate whispered back. "Very much so." King Charles glanced at them, one eyebrow slightly raised. He'd been informed of the delay, of course. Told there was a minor situation that required attention. But the ceremony couldn't be postponed, so he'd proceeded with the preliminaries. Now his eyes moved to Charlotte, studying his granddaughter with the careful attention of someone who understood that something had shifted. The ceremony began. The master of ceremonies announced each stage in a voice trained to fill vast spaces. Hymns were sung. Speeches were given. Traditions older than anyone in the room were observed with solemn precision. Charlotte stood perfectly still, her posture impeccable. She smiled when appropriate, maintained the graceful composure expected of her. To the cameras, to the dignitaries, to the watching world. Everything appeared normal, flawless, royal. But Kate could see the difference. Could feel it. Charlotte wasn't pretending anymore. She was present, authentic. The smile that touched her lips now wasn't painted on to meet expectations. It came from something deeper. From knowing she'd used her voice and been heard during the presentation of honors. When war veterans were recognized for their service, Charlotte's attention was absolute. When a young soldier, barely 20, received a medal for valor, tears streaming down his face. Charlotte's eyes glistened too. She wasn't performing empathy. She was feeling it. One of the older veterans, a man with a chest full of medals and eyes that had seen too much, met Charlotte's gaze as he passed. He gave her the smallest nod, a gesture of respect from one person to another, not to a princess. To a human being who understood what mattered, the ceremony continued for another hour. By royal standards, it was flawless. The delay was never mentioned. The schedule resumed its precise rhythm. Everything looked perfect. But under the surface, something had changed. The guards who stood at attention around the room had heard what happened in the corridor. Word spread the way it always does in places where people work closely together. By the time the ceremony ended, every staff member in the castle knew that Princess Charlotte had stopped, had refused to move forward until something wrong was made right. And more importantly, they knew that Kate had backed her, had chosen her daughter's conscience over centuries of protocol. When the final hymn concluded and the royal family began their recession from the throne room, Charlotte walked with a lightness that hadn't been there before. The weight she'd carried into the castle that morning was gone. Outside, as they made their way back through the private corridors, away from cameras and crowds, William finally spoke. "I heard what happened," he said quietly to Kate. With Mrs. Patterson, Kate glanced at him, and he was silent for a moment. Then, "You should have told me." "I would have helped," I know, Kate said. But Charlotte needed to see that standing up for what's right isn't someone else's job. It's ours. All of ours. William looked at his daughter, who was walking slightly ahead, whispering something to her brother George. "She's extraordinary, isn't she?" "She is," Kate agreed. Just like her father. That evening, as the castle settled into its nighttime quiet, Kate tucked Charlotte into bed. The little princess looked exhausted but content. The kind of tired that comes after doing something important. "Mummy," Charlotte said as Kate pulled the covers up. "Yes, darling. Do you think grandmother is angry?" Kate considered the question carefully. The queen consort hadn't spoken to them directly yet about the incident. There would be a conversation, certainly. But Kate had no regrets. Perhaps Kate said honestly, "But that's all right. Sometimes doing the right thing means disappointing people. Even people we love." Charlotte nodded slowly, processing this. "Mrs. Patterson sent me a note. Through one of the maids. She said thank you. and she called me brave. Kate felt her throat tighten. You were brave? You are brave. I was scared, Charlotte admitted. When I stopped walking, I thought everyone would be angry. I thought I'd ruined everything. But you stopped anyway. That's what courage is. Being scared and doing it anyway? Kate brushed a strand of hair from Charlotte's forehead. I'm proud of you. So proud, Charlotte smiled, her eyes already heavy with sleep. I'm glad I stopped, even if it was scary, because it was the right thing to do, as Kate whispered. It was. As Charlotte drifted off to sleep, Kate sat beside her for a while longer, watching her daughter's peaceful face. In the morning, there would be meetings. Discussions with the senior royals about protocol breaches and setting precedents. The press would analyze every frame of the delayed entrance, searching for scandal. But none of that mattered as much as what had happened in that corridor. When a 9-year-old girl decided that she wouldn't be silent in the face of injustice. When she chose conscience over comfort, when she stood her ground and refused to pretend, Kate rose quietly and moved to the window. Outside, Windsor Castle's grounds stretched into darkness, ancient and unchanging, or so it seemed. But things did change. Slowly, sometimes imperceptibly, through small moments of courage, through decisions that seemed tiny but rippled outward. Tomorrow, Mrs. Patterson would return to work. The head steward would receive a formal reprimand and retraining on staff treatment. And every person who'd witnessed what happened would carry the story with them. Would remember the day Princess Charlotte stopped walking and changed? Something fundamental about what it meant to wear a crown? Kate smiled in the darkness. Her daughter was already a true princess. Not because of her title or her bloodline, but because she understood something that took most people a lifetime to learn. That true nobility wasn't about appearing perfect. It was about choosing right over easy, justice over convenience, compassion over protocol. The guards outside Charlotte's door stood at attention, as they always did. But if Kate had looked closely, she might have seen the slight smile on their faces, the respect in their eyes, because they too understood what had happened today. A little girl had said no, and in doing so, had reminded everyone what royal duty truly meant. 3 days after the ceremony, Queen Camilla requested a private tea with Kate and Charlotte. The invitation was formal, delivered on embossed stationery by a household secretary. Kate's stomach had tightened when she read it. She'd expected this conversation, but had hoped for a bit more time. Charlotte, on the other hand, seemed surprisingly calm. Is grandmother upset? She'd asked. We'll find out together, Kate had replied. Now they sat in Camilla's private sitting room, space that managed to be both elegant and comfortable. Afternoon light filtered through lace curtains. China cups sat on delicate saucers. Everything was proper. Perfect. Controlled Camilla poured the tea herself, a gesture that was both intimate and slightly unsettling. She handed a cup to Kate, then one to Charlotte, who accepted it carefully with both hands. Thank you for coming, Camilla said, settling back into her chair. Her expression was neutral, impossible to read. I thought it was time we discussed what happened during the ceremony. Kate started to speak, but Camilla held up one hand gently. Please, let me finish first. Charlotte sat very still, her teacup balanced on her lap. Kate could see her daughter's fingers wrapped tightly around the delicate handle. When I first heard about the delay, Camilla continued, I was concerned. The ceremony had been planned for months. Dignitaries had traveled from around the world. Protocol is protocol for a reason. It provides structure, predictability, safety. She paused, taking a slow sip of her tea. The silence stretched. However, Camilla said, and Kate's heart lifted slightly at that word. I also heard the full story. Not just that there was a delay, but why? What Charlotte saw? What she felt? And how you responded, Catherine? Atla looked directly at Charlotte. You stopped walking because you didn't want to pretend. Is that correct? Charlotte nodded, her voice small but steady. Yes, grandmother. Mrs. Patterson was treated unfairly. I saw it. And you told me I had to smile and act happy. But I didn't feel happy. I felt... wrong. Wrong, Camilla repeated, testing the word. And you felt that being honest about that was more important than following instructions. Yes, Charlotte whispered. Kate tensed, ready to intervene, to protect her daughter from whatever criticism was coming. But Camilla's expression had softened in a way Kate hadn't expected. My dear child, Camilla said gently, do you know what I was doing when I was your age? Charlotte shook her head. I was learning to be invisible, to smile, to never cause trouble, to be decorative and pleasant and utterly forgettable. Camilla's voice carried something heavy, memory, regret.
Always.
Especially girls in certain circles should be seen and not heard, that our opinions didn't matter, that keeping the peace was more important than being authentic. She set her teacup down with careful precision. It took me decades to unlearn that, to find my voice, to realize that I had something worth saying. She looked at Charlotte with an intensity that made Kate hold her breath. You're 9 years old, and you already know something I didn't learn until I was in my 50s. That your conscience matters. That speaking up, even when it's uncomfortable, is not just acceptable. It's essential. Charlotte's eyes widened. Kate felt tears prick her own eyes. I'm not angry with you, Camilla said clearly. I'm impressed, and perhaps a bit envious. You have a courage I wish I'd had at your age. You said I had to smile, Charlotte said softly. You said that's what princesses do. Camilla nodded slowly. I did say that, and I was wrong. Or rather, I was incomplete. Yes, there are times when we must compose ourselves publicly, when we must be gracious, even when we're struggling. But that's different from pretending injustice doesn't exist. That's different from silencing our own moral compass. She leaned forward slightly. You taught me something that day, Charlotte. You reminded me that traditions should serve people, not imprison them. That protocol should enhance dignity, not replace conscience. Kate finally spoke, her voice thick with emotion. I wasn't sure if we'd made the right choice. Stopping everything. Disrupting the ceremony. You didn't disrupt the ceremony, Camilla corrected. You delayed it by 12 minutes, and in doing so, you demonstrated something far more valuable than punctuality. You showed that this family listens, that we care, that we're willing to pause everything to address genuine concerns. She stood, moving to the window. Outside, the castle gardens stretched in geometric perfection. Do you know what the press is saying about that day? Kate's stomach tightened. She deliberately avoided most media coverage, knowing it would be a mixture of criticism and speculation. They're saying that Princess Charlotte represents a new generation of royals. One that balances tradition with authenticity. One that isn't afraid to show real humanity. Camilla turned back to face them. The approval ratings from that ceremony are the highest we've seen in years. Not despite the delay, because of it. Charlotte looked confused. People liked that we were late? Camilla smiled. People liked that you were real. That when confronted with something wrong, you didn't ignore it or pretend it away. You addressed it. She returned to her seat. In our family's long history, we've sometimes prioritized appearance over substance, tradition over truth. And that's cost us. Cost us trust. Cost us connection with the people we're meant to serve. She looked at Kate. What you did that day, backing Charlotte's instinct, supporting her stand, it wasn't a break from royal duty. It was the truest expression of it. Kate felt something release in her chest. A tension she'd been carrying for days. Thank you, she said softly. Don't thank me, Camilla replied. You made the right choice. You didn't need my validation for that. She turned to Charlotte again. But I do want to be clear about something, my dear. Having a conscience, speaking up for what's right, these are wonderful traits. But they also come with responsibility. Listening intently. If you're going to be someone who stops when something is wrong, who refuses to pretend, then you must also be someone who follows through, who continues to pay attention, who doesn't just make a scene and then forget about it. Camilla's voice was firm but kind. Mrs. Patterson was reinstated. That's good. But what about other staff members who might be treated poorly? What about other situations where power is misused? Will you notice those too? Charlotte nodded seriously. I'll try. I'll pay attention. That's all any of us can do, Camilla said. Try. Pay attention. Use whatever influence we have, however small, to make things a bit better. She smiled. And you, my dear, have quite a bit of influence. Even at 9 years old, they talked for another hour. Not about protocol or duty or royal obligations, but about real things. About how difficult it was to know when to speak and when to stay silent. About the weight of living in public. About finding the balance between service and self-preservation. When they finally left, Charlotte hugged her grandmother tightly. Camilla held her close, whispering something in her ear that made the little girl smile. As they walked back through the castle corridors, Charlotte seemed lighter, happier. "Mommy," she said, "I think I understand now." Understand what? Being a princess isn't about being perfect. It's about being brave enough to care, and brave enough to do something about it. Kate squeezed her daughter's hand. Yes, that's exactly what it is. That evening, during dinner with the whole family, George leaned over to Charlotte. "You're famous now, you know. Everyone's talking about what you did." Charlotte made a face. "I don't want to be famous for stopping. I just wanted Mrs. Patterson to have her job back."
"Oh, well, you got that?"
George said. "And now there's a whole new policy about staff treatment. Dad had to sit through a 3-hour meeting about it." William, overhearing, smiled. "Worth every minute. The head steward has been reassigned. We're implementing new protocols for conflict resolution, regular staff reviews, an anonymous reporting system." He looked at Charlotte. "All because you paid attention and decided it mattered."
"Oh."
Charlotte blushed, returning to her food. But Kate could see the quiet satisfaction in her daughter's eyes. The understanding that her choice had rippled outward, had created real change. After dinner, Kate found a moment alone with William. They stood on a balcony overlooking the grounds. The evening air cool and still. "She's going to be remarkable," William said quietly. "She already is," Kate replied. "Do you think she understands the full weight of what happened? What it means?" Kate considered this. Not entirely. She's 9, but she understands enough. She knows that her voice matters, that standing up for what's right is worth the cost. That's more than most adults know. William nodded slowly. "When I was her age, I would have walked past Mrs. Patterson, would have ignored it. Not because I didn't care, but because I didn't think I could do anything about it. Didn't think it was my place." "We're trained to think that way," Kate said gently. "Charlotte is being trained differently. By example, by experience. By you," William added, looking at his wife. "You could have overruled her. Could have told her to be quiet and move forward. Every protocol said you should have." "Every protocol except the important one," Kate said. "The one about raising children who understand that power is meant to serve, not to silence." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching lights flicker on across the castle grounds. Somewhere below, staff members were finishing their evening duties, Mrs. Patterson among them, going about her work with renewed confidence, knowing she'd been seen, heard, valued, and in her bedroom. Princess Charlotte was writing in her journal, a habit her mother had encouraged. The entry was simple, written in careful cursive. "Today, grandmother told me I was right to stop. She said being a princess means being brave enough to care. I'm going to keep paying attention. I'm going to keep caring. Because that's what matters. Not the crown or the ceremony or being perfect. Caring matters. Speaking up matters. I'm going to remember that. Always." She closed the journal and placed it on her nightstand. Tomorrow, there would be lessons and obligations and all the normal routines of royal life. But something fundamental had shifted. Charlotte knew now that she didn't have to choose between being a princess and being herself. That authenticity and duty could coexist. That the best way to honor her position was to use it for good. The guards outside her door heard her light click off, heard the soft sounds of a child settling into sleep, and they smiled. These men who'd spent years protecting royals because they recognized something special. They'd witnessed a moment when the future took a different shape. When a little girl's refusal to pretend had reminded everyone what truly mattered, in the morning, the castle would wake to business as usual. Schedules would resume. Protocol would continue. But underneath it all, a small revolution had occurred. One that started with a 9-year-old's courage and a mother's wisdom. One that proved that the most powerful thing a princess could do wasn't to be perfect, it was to be real.